everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Official Visit podcast. I am Tyson Alger, and I am joined here by Andrew Greif. We cover the Ducks for the Oregonian, and finally, we have a little bit of news to cover. It's a little bit dated, but Kirk Merritt, a sophomore wide receiver, has announced that he will transfer away from the program. He posted a message on Twitter just citing family issues for why he wants to look elsewhere. And this was actually some news that kind of swept through the Oregon fandom because Merritt was a relatively highly regarded recruit coming out of high school. I believe he was a Spark national champion. And people do love reading those sort of things. We never quite saw that production in his 1 year at Oregon. So let's bring in Andrew here to get kind of a little bit of the initial reaction to Merritt's departure. I know you had tweeted that he was a player that you really wanted to see on the field this year just because obviously he's a very talented physical athlete. What were some of your initial thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, just that I thought that he had he just by his look and the way he moved on the field, which was not often. We didn't see him that often. I think you have his stat line in front of you. He caught 5 passes in all of his true freshman year, but he looked just in kind of the way he moved and kind of his his style of play. He reminded me a little bit of like Braylon Addison. Not an overly tall type of guy, but a good first step, and had some shiftiness. And I thought that he would have a natural place in the rotation. Obviously, the trouble at Oregon right now is that the rotation at receiver is pretty deep. So whether or not that's a real reason why he decided to leave, or whether that was part of a decision why he wanted to leave, Kirk didn't get back to me. I reached out to him, didn't get back to me, so we don't really know beyond what his Twitter statement was. I think that was obviously he wasn't going to be a total shoe-in to a 50-catch season because of one, Royce Freeman being a terrific back. They're going to hand the ball off to 1 million times this year, and also there's just a lot of guys in front of him, like Dwayne Stanford, or not, even if not ahead of him, but on at least equal footing, like Dwayne Stanford, Dan Carrington, Devin Allen, if he ends up coming back, Charles Nelson. I mean, they have some good, and of course Dylan Mitchell, who's a true freshman breakout star from the spring game.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you there in the sense of I don't think the Ducks are going to really notice his departure a ton this year. I think this is something that you could notice, next year or the year after when you start to lose some of that depth that they have. With this will be Dwayne Stanford's last year. This will be Aaron Carrington's last year. Who knows if Devin Allen's back on the team next year, depending on how track stuff goes. So a very crowded field this year, and I don't know if he and Dylan Mitchell were kind of talked about this spring as kind of being, the two guys after like Charles Nelson in that rotation that might get some more reps this year. So I don't know where he fit in this year, but a guy with that talent, you were definitely expecting. Oregon has an ability to get talented guys on the field if they think they can make a difference. And I do think a lot of people thought that with Merritt's physical abilities, he would. We just won't see that. I was kind of thinking that we might see him a lot on kickoff return this year, but obviously that's a moot point now.
Yeah, and don't forget Jalen Brown and Alex Ofadale, who are, came in as really highly rated recruits in 2 different recruiting classes, 2014 and 2015, but their roles, because of I think Brown is going to be a redshirt sophomore and Ofadale a redshirt freshman this year. You haven't seen a whole lot of them, and so I think they're also in that conversation too, where they could get a lot of looks. And Ofadale is a tall guy. I think he's about 6'4". He has some height that there isn't a ton of that in the receiving corps. So I think that helps him. So yeah, you're right. They're set right now at that spot, and I actually thought because they were so set last year. I kind of wondered. I thought it was kind of a little curious to why they threw Merritt in there as often as he did, or not as often as they did. I wasn't sure quite if they just thought that sometimes whether it was a guy who highly rated recruit and he wanted to get some playing time, maybe an assurance that he had a spot. It just seemed like it wasn't this massive role, or even a very regular role. So I wondered why burning that 1 year's eligibility why they would do that. So I think that they wanted to get a look at him and obviously show him that he did have a place. So that's something I definitely wondered about last year. But Scott Frost said that whenever he played, the former OC, he was saying that he just thought Merritt had all the potential in the world, and you saw that from his spark measurements. You know, a huge 40-yard jump, vertical jump, 40-yard dash was quick. I mean, he had all the measurables, and so that's usually going to be a pretty good predictor of success. But you know, we just don't know.
So I think Merritt's departure kind of got Twitter going a lot of it, and I swear, as soon as I posted our story, I had this one guy send me about 9 DMs about how the world is falling at Oregon and how this is another latest example of the Ducks' loss of stature amongst the college football world. I don't really think that this really, you know, he was referencing, you know, some of the recruiting fails and all that sort of stuff. I don't really think these two tie hand in hand there.
Yeah, although that's definitely a sentiment I get all the time, and I'm sure if you're listening to this, you may have felt that way too at some point, probably during the Alamo Bowl. But I get a lot of emails or DMs from people who really do not have confidence in Coach Mark Helfrich. It's going to be his fourth year, which is crazy to think it's already his fourth year already. But he was rated, I think, seventh highest, the seventh best coach in the Pac-12 by Athlon this week in one of their preseason polls. And, you know, I'm not going to say people should put their faith into a preseason, you know, ranking like that, because there's very little science behind it. But I think it does align in a lot of ways with the kind of emails and I'm sure you have been getting, that people think this is a make or break year for Helfrich and the Ducks. They'd like to see them rebound from a 9-win season to do something big. And fair or not, he's invited a lot of criticism 2 years after getting the Ducks to a title game appearance.
Sticking with the wide receivers here for a second, obviously Darren Carrington is going to be their number one option. I think he showed enough in his 6 games last year. You know, whether he develops chemistry or not with Dakota Prukop or Travis Johnson, he's an absolute talent. He's the best talent they have in the receiving corps. Dwayne Stanford's a great red zone threat. You think Charles Nelson slides right in there in kind of like that number 3 role?
Yeah, I think you could like Charles Nelson could come in and like fix my washer and dryer tomorrow, and it would be like the best. He'd be the best in the Portland area at that craft. I mean, he is like, I just think his skill set is so incredibly vast that Charles can do whatever he wants. You wrote a profile about that a couple years ago, and it's really held true that he is just a football player. I think that's something that, like, the highest compliment that you hear the coaches say, that he just is a football player, and you know, whatever that really means, they mean it with the most sincere reserve for how happy they are that he is on their team, because he blows people up on special teams. He was a decent safety last year in a short-lived run, and then, you know, on offense, I think that he just clicks when he's playing wide receiver. He's not going to be he's not going to be a go up and get it kind of guy. His height just isn't there, but he is so good about finding creases. So I really do think that he could be a very good wide receiver if that's his only role this year.
It's really hard to do predictions for his season. I had someone asking me, you know, what I thought he was going to get catches and yards wise, and the reason I say it's hard to do that is just because we haven't seen him focus solely on a position like this. I mean, even his freshman year, you know, it was a true freshman that was kind of working his way into the rotation, kind of like maybe Kirk Merritt might have been this year. And then last year, obviously, he's just all over the field. So, I mean, in terms of projections, I have absolutely no idea what to expect from him. But like you, I agree that when he's on the field, he's definitely one of the more talented players out there.
I'm not sure if you agree with this or not, but I do think that some of his success can be tied to how many places he plays and how that catches people off guard, and how you can't always prepare for him because you don't know where he'll be. You know, I think it's fair to wonder how good he can be if he's in a sustained role, where people can get a lot more film on him, a lot more analysis of his tendencies, etc., and maybe see how a defense will react to that. I think about safety. He was, like I said, he was a decent safety. I mean, he barely played before that, and then they threw him in before the Washington State game, and he had a couple screw-ups, but he really did hit the hardest of any DB, and I think that he more than enough held his own especially for what limited knowledge he had going into it. But I think that offenses, I'm sure, looked at him and said, okay, this guy is new. How can we pick him apart by the fourth or fifth game? I'm sure they saw tendencies. I wonder if coordinators on the defensive side will now do that if he stays on offense quite a bit. I still think he has a really hard to replicate skill set. He's so powerful for his frame that I don't think it's easy to replicate that in practice if you're trying to scout team him up. But I think there will be some analysis of his game that could help defenses down the road. Say it's like the 8th or ninth game of the year, and maybe he has 30 catches or something like that. Sure, they'll notice tendencies and ways they can maybe kind of screw him up or something like that in coverages. But I think that Nelson is also really smart and might be able to kind of counter those moves.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I want to switch gears here to just cap this. This is going to be a relatively shorter podcast today, but do you want to switch gears and talk a little bit Elgin Cook?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, so we're recording this on a Thursday. It's not going to be posted until Friday morning, so the NBA draft will be done with at that point. Elgin Cook is probably the lone Oregon Duck player who's going to have a shot at at being drafted. Dwayne Benjamin's the only other senior, and he's not even in consideration. Cook is probably going to be a late to second round pick if he gets picked. I just don't see him getting picked tonight. But that being said, for anybody that's watched him play since he started at Oregon, I think he's really just improved to get to this point. I know you covered him in his early years at Oregon. What type of player was he back then?
He was the kind of guy who would get the ball in certain situations, whether it was open court or 18 feet from the basket, and he would, kind of take a couple dribbles. And I think that the general sense I got was that people would start saying, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa!" Like, Elgin, pass the ball, pass the ball. He was a little out of control. Like his handle hadn't caught up to his athleticism, and his decision making hadn't caught up to his athleticism. But he really, I thought, in the last couple years, did a very good job of developing a jumper, mid-range jumper, that turned him from a one-dimensional, just board-crashing athlete into a really nice, solid, all-around player. And then defensively, too, he was able, at his size, 6'7", 6'8", and very good athleticism to, not always lock up some guys, but really, I thought he was a good option defensively for, a more athletic forward. Even if he was taller than Cook could always stay with him.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think he was one of the players on Oregon's roster the last 2 years where he was just straight up athletic enough where if he wanted to cover someone defensively, he wasn't going to be lacking in terms of physical abilities there. I think one of the things about him is the last 2 seasons he's kind of played swingman roles. He was the number 2 to Joseph Young 2 seasons ago, and last year he kind of took that role again to like Dylan Brooks and even Tyler Dorsey sometimes. But the one thing that I was always most impressed about Cook's game, especially this past season, was just how consistent he was. You had guys like Dylan Brooks who could go for 30 points one night and then show up with like 7 or 8 the next night, and same with Dorsey and same with Chris Boucher, and even Dwayne Benjamin could light it up sometimes. But Cook was pretty much an automatic 14, 15 points every night. And when you did see Oregon play against better competition, specifically in that Oklahoma game in the Elite 8, Brooks and Dorsey both had a lot of trouble scoring. And Cook was the only person who was able to kind of consistently not only get his shot off, but when he just kind of put his head down and went to the rim, he was getting there with authority. And so while he isn't as polished, I mean, he's come a long way with that mid-range stuff, and he's actually started hitting a couple threes last year too. He's really, I think he was one of the better players in the Pac-12 of just being able to get to the rim in the paint and score from there. And if he continues to develop some of that outside stuff, I don't think he's reached his ceiling yet. It's just a matter of where and when he gets that opportunity to keep playing.
Yeah, and I think that something too that really helped Oregon last year. I'm curious to see who might fill the void in 2016, 2017 for the basketball team. Is he had a certain, tell me if you agree, a little bit of like a nastiness to his game that I think Dylan Brooks has as well. But I think that what made Cook stand out was that he was really consistent. I don't think he really shrunk from big games. He doesn't always have the biggest stat line, but I think that he had a nastiness and aggressiveness in a way that he usually played hard that you're not always going to get from every player. And I think that he just showed up to big games.
Yeah.
And I think that's and when he did, it's like he almost took losses or deficits like a personal affront and just played angry and in some ways kind of was the emotional core of that team. That's me watching, not as the beat writer. That's me watching mostly from home. So I don't know if that really came across from if you'd ever talked to people about him on the team. But I thought that he was a guy who really you could kind of pick the barometer of how the Ducks were going to play one night by how he and Brooks were really kind of playing in the early going.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I think the one thing about Cook compared to Brooks, though, is Brooks is very polar in terms of he can have some games where he gets way too fired up and it takes him out of it, and then there's some games where he doesn't quite feel like he's in it. Cook kind of brought that angriness, that edginess to every single game. If there was one player, you didn't want to piss off with a quote or a story or something, it was Elgin Cook, because he just kind of has a scowl that he wears that it shows on the court. And the thing about him though too is my first year covering the beat, he wasn't a great interview at all. It was very kind of short answers and stuff, and you kind of got a feel for it that he just didn't really care to do it. But then last year he kind of evolved in that aspect too. I'm not saying that all of a sudden he started giving us poetic quotes or anything, but it was a guy who kind of developed and kind of felt comfortable in that role of being a team leader. And I agree with you in the sense of as he went, the team went too, in terms of just having that attitude and demeanor on the floor there.
I wonder if he'll go the Mike Mosier route, the player from 2013-14 for Oregon. Played 1 year, got some good looks in summer ball in the NBA summer leagues, and then decided that he had a better offer in Europe. I think he played really well at the Celtics in some summer tournaments, and then decided to go to Europe. But I wonder if that might be the route Cook takes, where obviously he wants feedback from the NBA, but then might get some suitors from overseas where you can make a really good living. Yeah,
the one thing I'm intrigued about is just what position he slots in the NBA. So he's listed at 6'6", which is kind of almost no man's land for the NBA if you're not a great jump up shooter. But I wonder if, with the way that the NBA's changed over the last couple of years with Golden State playing those small lineups, if that kind of has evolved a little bit to a place where maybe he does have a position in there.
Yeah, the thing with small lineups is you have to be able to be a threat as a shooter. And so I think that if he could show people that he can hit from 15 to 18 feet consistently, 45% or better this summer, I think that could be a really good thing for him, because if he's a liability and he's only 6'6", then that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So, I guess we'll have to see what happens there. Roberson from Colorado is thriving in Oklahoma City, and he's definitely more of a perimeter-oriented guard than Cook is, but I think that he's done really well with I think what we call limited jump shot. So I'm not saying he's a model, but I'm just thinking I might be able to talk to as a guest, just a teaser. I'm gonna try to make sure this happens, but next week there might be a chance that the guest is Joey Harrington on the podcast.
Oh, look at that!
So we'll see if we can finagle that one, but I will be doing a small little event with him, and so I'll try to get him afterward. And Joey, if you're listening to this, I'll talk to you later about this.
Sounds good. All right, everyone. As always, you can find all of our work at OregonLive.com. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Alger. He's at Andrew Greif. And, if you like this podcast, and if you're not listening on iTunes, you can find us on iTunes, and we won't kill you if you feel like giving us a rating. And until then, thanks for visiting.